My dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 20th of September. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates. So let's start. First, we're going to discuss that these, we can say, four republics on the south of Ukraine: LPR, Lugansk People Republic; DPR, Donetsk People Republic; Zaporozhye District and Kherson District, announced about referendums on the territories of these republics, of these areas, and there is some differences in the questions. If we're talking about LPR, DPR, and Kherson District, there are going to be just one question. If these regions want to join and to become a part of Russian Federation. If we're talking about the Zaporozhye District, there are three questions. The first question is to leave Ukraine. The second question: do you want to leave Ukraine? The question on this upcoming referendum. The second question: do you want to create a separate government, separate entity? And the final question will be: do you want to join the territory of Russian Federation? So three upcoming referendums, and there are a lot of questions about these referendums. If we're talking about LPR, we don't have any question about this situation because, as you can see, the entire territory of Lugansk People Republic was liberated, and the Russians control almost the entire territory of this region. If we take a look at this map, this is the borders of LPR. There is just one town, Belogorka, that Ukrainians managed to return during the previous 24 hours attacks. They established control of this town, so this is the only town that is under Ukrainian control. The rest of the territory is under Russian control. If we're talking about DPR, the Russians or DPR forces control something around 50% of this territory, of the territory of this state or this republic, and 50% is under Ukrainian control. And the question is, what does it mean? Like, do you want to join to become a part of Russian Federation in the borders of current situation, or the question is about the entire Donetsk region? This is a very important question, and for now we don't have any answer about this question. But I believe that the question was about entire territory, not just the DPR area that was before 24th of February, also Mariupol, because Mariupol is the part of DPR, and the territory that is under Ukrainian control. Zaporozhye, if we're talking about this area, this territory is split into parts. The south one with the biggest towns like Energodar with the Zaporozhye power plant, Melitopol, Berdyansk, these towns is under Russian control, and the referendum is going to be on this area. And there is the same question as in DPR about what territories this referendum is going to talk about just the territory under Russian control, or with this referendum the town by the name of Zaporozhye is also going to be considered as the territory that is a part of Russian Federation. So this is a very important question. And if we're talking about Kherson District, there are no questions because all territory of Kherson District is under Russian control, more than 90%. There are just few towns on the north, like Vysokopolye, Arkhangelsk, these towns that is still that was taken back by the Ukrainians, but I believe that the Russians, the Kherson district, if they are talking about referendum, I believe that they are talking about entire area, including the territory that now is under Ukrainian control. So this is the four referendums, but there are also another few interesting topics. What the Russians are planning to do with the territory of Kharkiv district between Kupiansk and the border of LPR, because there are no referendums in this area. I believe that the Russians were planning to do some referendums before, like few weeks ago, when this territory was under Russian control, but after Ukraine counteroffensive operation, they were forced to leave this area, and now this is like the territory that is considered as the part of Kharkiv district. The Russians are not planning to do any referendum in this area. I'm talking about this line from Barova towards Kupiansk, Dvorechye, this small area. Maybe this is going to be some buffer, or if after this referendum the war somehow is going to stop, maybe the Russians will leave this territory according to their border, because the Lugansk People Republic border is going to be the border of Russian Federation. So this is the question about these territories and so on. If we're talking about the Ukrainians, you remember that during almost the entire military special operation, the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, said that there is a possibility to have negotiations with the Russians only in case if they move all their forces from the territory of Ukraine. So we can say that as soon as the Russians complete referendums and as soon as the Russians join the Kherson, Zaporozhye, Donetsk and Lugansk district as a part of Russian Federation, we can say that they will complete every single Zelensky request point, because from that moment this territory is going to be the territory of Russian Federation and there would be no forces on the territory of Ukraine. So I believe that after these referendums the Russians and Ukrainians can start negotiations because from the legal point of view the Russians will complete every single Zelensky request about the upcoming negotiations. Now, all these referendums. Another important update is about that these referendums is going to these countries, these republics are planning to start referendums in 3 days, starting from the 23rd of September. These republics are planning to create few days. They're planning to do these referendums for few days. But I believe that this referendum is going to be finished in 1 day because, as I know, according to information we have, the Ukrainians accumulates a lot of forces all along the front line. And I believe that there are very heavy clashes in Liman area. If we take a look at the Russian sources map, you're going to see that there are a lot of icons. The Ukrainians managed to cross Seversky Donetsk River. They established a very powerful bridgehead in this area and they're storming Liman. Liman is under very heavy fire. The Ukrainians shelling this town and trying to reduce this town as much as possible. Also, they are using cluster bombs. And I believe, and the Russians are saying that this night the Ukrainians are planning to start another storm of Liman. This is very important to do this because Liman belongs to DPR Republic, and so that's why they want to, of course, they want to ruin the upcoming referendums in this area. If we are talking about the area between Bakhmut and Seversk, there are no changes in this area. The only update that the Russian source map has been updated. And today we got some updates that the Russians managed to clear or establish control over the area between Nikolaevka, Drugaya and Zaitsev, over all this area. There was few icons this morning showing that the Russians got control over this territory. If we're talking about Donetsk, there is no changes. This town just is under very heavy fire, under very heavy shelling. But there is no update. There are no updates about like accumulating of the Ukrainian forces or something like this. The most important updates are coming from the area between Kupiansk and Ugledar, from this front line. The Russian sources are saying that Ukrainians accumulated here a very big, powerful fist and that they need to ruin the upcoming referendum. And of course, the capital of Zaporozhye area is Melitopol. This is the capital of this area. So that's why the Ukrainians need somehow to penetrate the defense line and to attack this area. But the thing is that if we are talking about Zaporozhye area and Kharkiv area that was under Russian control, it's totally two different areas because the Russian sources are saying that the Russians prepared two lines of defense all along the Zaporozhye area. They understand the critical situation and they understand that this is the weakest point of the Russians. Furthermore, if you remember, the Russians moved here their third military corps. There is LPR forces, DPR forces in this area, so they expect the Ukrainian counteroffensive operation. And the Ukrainians don't have any other option. They need to ruin this referendum because if they won't be able to do this, in a week, all these territories like Kherson district, Zaporozhye district, DPR district and LPR district is going to become a part of Russia. And in a week, the Ukrainians will fight not with these like small republics, proxy countries. They will fight on the territory of Russian Federation. And today, the Russian parliament adopted a lot of laws. And the main thing, the most important update about those adoptions is that they did a lot of adoption in criminal law, with the criminal law. First of all, they include such things like wartime, like mobilization, and they adjusted the punishments for criminal crimes that connected with the military time. For example, the Russians now adopted such thing that if you surrender, then you might be got into jail up to 10 years. So this is like the situation. They understand that Ukrainians may continue offensive operation and attacking on the south of Russian Federation in this case. And of course, in this case, the Russians will have to announce about military time, about wartime. They will have to make some mobilization. They will have to move some conscript in this area, as we discussed in my previous videos. And of course, they understand that there are going to be a lot of conscripts and they need to force them to stand there and to fight with the Ukrainians. So that's why they make these criminal laws much harder than it used to be, just and in sphere of wartime. And the Russians have already prepared. Furthermore, today, on the 20th of September, I believe that by the time you're going to see this video, Putin and the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation are planning to make some report. It will be like online report. They're planning to say something, but I believe when you see this video, you will be already see this video. I believe that they will talk about upcoming referendums and so on. And as you can see, the situation has been totally changed, and all these republics decided to start these referendums on the basis of few things. The first one is a retreat and Russian defeat in Kharkiv area, and to be more precise, on the basis of incoming information about filtration process. As you know, a lot of people from this area were killed, wounded, or got into jail just for one thing. If you even received some help from the Russian forces, those people were got into jail. So this is like the first thing that all these people are afraid of, and they want to understand that they're part of Russian Federation. They are ready to fight, they are ready to do mobilization, they are ready to suffer all this artillery strike and everything they are suffer now, but they want to understand that they're doing this for something, but not as a proxy government that can be dropped or left anytime the Russian they can do. So this is the first reason. And the second one is the shelling of Donetsk during the previous weeks. We discussed those shellings every day in my video about a lot of casualties among civilians and so on. So these two factors was the main reason why all these republics started this referendum. I'm talking about legal side, about media side. Of course, we understand that there are a lot of underground process, but like the process that the Russians wanted civilians and people all over the world to see is that the filtration process in Kharkiv area and shelling of Donetsk these days and something like this. This is the situation about those referendums. If we're talking about the situation on the front line, as I told you, the Ukrainians are attacking and shelling all these towns very heavily. If we're talking about Nikolaev district, the Ukrainians lost on this front line up to 70 soldiers and something around 15 armored vehicles. The main forces that were attacked by the Russians is 35th Brigade and 114th Brigade. If we're talking about Kherson district or Nikolaev Kherson district, there is 59th Brigade in this area, lost around 100 soldiers and 7 armored vehicles. The Russians were shelling the Andreevka bridgehead, and they were shelling the area between Nikolaev and Kherson, and the Russians were shelling the north of Kherson. There's 3 main directions where the Ukrainians can start their offensive operation. If we're talking about Zaporozhye area, there is no changes. Just the thing that Ukrainians accumulated a lot of forces, and during the previous week they did a lot of recon combats in this area, trying to understand where is the weakest position of the Russians. If you're talking about Donetsk, as you can see, this town is still under very heavy shelling. The Ukrainians also have some position around the town, and they expect just in order to start doing something. Of course, if you're talking about the Ukrainians, they are very angry. They are very angry, and I believe that they will start counter-offensive operation all along the front line because they are very angry. We can understand them, and this will bring more losses, and I believe that it's also part of Russian plan. Now they're in defense state. As you can see, they're not planning to take any territory, just like the Donetsk Bakhmut area. But now the Russians need to force Ukrainians to start counteroffensive operation immediately. The Russians don't want the Ukrainians to get more West weapons, to receive more trained forces from the West. They want them to attack all the time, and they want to reduce them all the time. And as you can see from the previous offensive operation in Kharkiv, 2 weeks passed since that moment, and as you can see, the Ukrainians haven't started anything since that time. And this situation works in Ukrainian favor because they're able to regroup, to fulfill, to bring more forces, to train more forces, to get more West weapons and so on. And this is not very good for the Russians. Of course, they want to push them, to force them to attack. And I believe that these referendums is a very nice factor to force the Ukrainians to do something. There is just only one area where the Ukrainians have some success, and this is about Liman. So as we discussed at the beginning, they managed to establish bridgehead all along the river. The Russians are shelling this area heavily. They prepared for these battles. They moved a lot of forces here. And I believe that as soon as referendums will be finished, the Russians will move conscripts to this area. But anyway, wait till that time. They need to hold these towns as long as possible. They need just to stay there another few weeks. But this night is very important because the Russians are saying that this night the Ukrainians are planning to storm these towns with everything they have, because during this entire day there was a very heavy shelling and artillery preparation in this area. If we are talking about Kharkiv area, there is no changes on the Kupiansk, on the Oskol River. The only thing that more and more sources are saying that the Russians managed to push the Ukrainians on the west side of this river, and now entire area along the Oskol River is under Russian control. I haven't received any video confirmation from let's say even Kupiansk, but anyway, this information we have. And if we're talking about entire area, the Ukrainians lost around 120 soldiers and 12 armored vehicles from this area. So the situation is critical. The situation is very critical, and nobody understands what is going to be. If we're talking about the NATO and the Chancellor of Germany, they told that they will not liberate and recognize these referendums. If you know, Macron, the president of France, were trying to call Putin, but Putin refused to talk with him. So the situation is critical. And I believe that something terrible might happen. If we're talking about Belarus, this the country in the north, today the president of Belarus announced about starting very powerful preparation. He ordered his authorities to be prepared for everything, and even to be prepared to start wartime in the territory of Belarus. So that's why everybody should be prepared, because we understand if Ukrainians continue attacks on the territory of Russian Federation, that means that all Russian allies like Belarus, Armenia, Kazakhstan, all these countries should be involved in this military operation, this war, immediately as an allies of Russian Federation. So let's see. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds you to condemn any violence in Ukraine. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.